Hey folks, this is Kalani. One of the larger new pieces of content coming in patch 9.15 is the Legion Timewalking event. Yes, it's that time once again. Another expansion is being added into the Timewalking roster. We don't really have too many old expansions left to add into this system, so we're gonna run out pretty soon, but Legion might be one of the more exciting options for Timewalking fun. A lot of players really enjoyed the Legion expansion for a variety of reasons, so getting to experience it again could be really fun. But this Timewalking event is going to be different for quite a few reasons, so let's take a deep dive into this new event, how it works, what rewards are on offer, and break down everything you need to know about Legion Timewalking. Alright, Legion Timewalking. Cool, another Timewalking event, but honestly this might be the one to actually get me somewhat excited. Legion was a really good expansion with great dungeons for the most part. They might still be some of the best dungeons ever made in WoW, so being able to run them again with an actual reason, besides Transmog, is going to be pretty fun. That's the first thing we'll be able to do during this event, sign up for Legion dungeons as a Timewalking dungeon option. That means we can get Legion dungeon gear at a higher item level than usual. It gives you another option for collecting the various transmog pieces, and of course it's another source of time warped badges. So more of the typical time walking stuff really. With a new time walking event comes a new time walking vendor to spend all of those hard-earned time walking badges on. The Legion time walking vendor can be found in Legion Dalaran right next to the Flight Master. The new mount from this vendor is the Val'sharah Hippogriff that will cost 5,000 badges as per usual, and it's a nice recolor of some of the Legion Hippogriff mounts that are already in the game. There's also a replica of Aegis of Agramar. This is actually the shield we hunt after in Stormheim, and the same model is used in the God King encounter. It's also one of the big artifacts we used in the Tomb of Sargeras, so being able to collect and use that shield model is actually pretty cool. There's a Nightborn Guard's Vigilance toy, which turns you into a very suspicious Suramar Guard NPC, complete with a stealth detection zone, special effects, and guard voice lines, you know, just in case you ever forgot how fun Suramar was. There are also a bunch of Nightborn-themed weapon transmogs to collect as well, including 2 shields, both of which look amazing in my opinion. I was always kind of sad that they didn't make better use of Suramar and the Nightborn aesthetic, because they could have made some amazing weapons and armor, just like these transmogs. There's a mace you can collect as well, which looks great. There's an arc saber, which is again super cool. They're relying a lot on the spell effects to make these weapons, which is a nice change of pace. Then perhaps one of the coolest models you can collect is a new glaive weapon, except it's not a glaive, it's actually a sword transmog. That means anyone and everyone who can use swords will be able to use this transmog, which is a lot of classes. It's not just limited to the demon hunters. You could make some really cool sets around this sword, and I'm excited to see what players come up with, especially when combined with those shields from earlier. There's also a staff which looks very similar to the mace in appearance. That's going to be nice for all the casters out there who can't use swords. And the last weapon transmog is a bow. This one is the only weapon that doesn't follow the same Nightborn theme. This is actually an Argusian bow, so that's more of the Argus theme, but it's still another great transmog to collect. Plate classes will be able to pick up the Raven Crest's Plumage Ensemble, which will unlock a full set of gear that gives you the appearance of a Black Rook-Hold Guard. More transmog is always nice, right? There are also various other pieces of less exciting gear in here, a few random pieces for every armor type at item level 164, so still not particularly useful for actually gearing up any of your characters, but it's a few extra pieces of transmog to collect as well. Then there are various profession boxes you can buy for Legion profession materials, including an option to buy the Blood of Sargeras currency. So if you need any of those for some older Legion content, there's going to be another source of obtaining them in a Timewalking event. And then there's also a rep token for pretty much every Legion rep to help boost those up to Exalted if you haven't done that yet, and they will also be useful in helping anyone farming Paragon boxes for those elusive Legion mounts, and that's pretty much everything on offer from this vendor. Some cool items for sure, definitely better than most other Timewalking events in my opinion. That's not all for this new Timewalking event though. During Legion Timewalking, we will be able to enter the Mage Tower again. The Mage Tower has been locked since the end of the Legion expansion, so it will be very interesting to get back in there and see how well it has aged over the last few years. We know that the same 7 scenarios will be available, and nothing has really changed about them. So if you did the Mage Tower back in Legion, you should know exactly what to expect because it hasn't changed at all. They're just opening it back up. Curiously, the blue post that confirmed the Mage Tower reopening said the Mage Tower will operate similarly to how it did during Legion. The original 7 different challenges will be available to try repeatedly for the duration of Legion Timewalking. So that tells us 2 things. 1, we shouldn't have any strict limits on attempting these revived challenges, and 2, this will only be active during Legion Timewalking. That does give us a very short window of time to play this content. When Legion Timewalking is active for the first time in patch 9.15, it's going to last for 2 weeks, but after that, it's going to go back to that 1-week event every so often, so not a great deal of time to play this content at all. What this doesn't tell us is whether or not the Mage Tower will be free to enter. If you remember back to Legion, there were 2 restrictions on entering the Mage Tower. First, it had to be built. If you pop down to the Broken Shore right now, you can see the buildings are still slowly but surely being built over time. If the Mage Tower wasn't completely built, you weren't allowed to go in. Hopefully the Mage Tower is up 100% of the time during Legion Timewalking, and it doesn't actually have to be built by the players, otherwise that would severely limit how often you could enter, and how long you actually have to play the challenges. The other restriction was a currency, nether shards. If memory serves, these were obtainable relatively easily throughout the Broken Shore zone and taking part in the content down there. So killing rares, collecting chests, you know, the typical new expansion zone that's trying to copy the Timeless Isle for the umpteenth time, just like Korthia. If you need nether shards to enter, that's also going to be a huge restriction on how many times you can try the Mage Tower challenges, but hopefully those 2 restrictions will not be in place. I hope the dev team isn't stupid enough to actually put those in place, and the Mage Tower ends up being a fun mini-game kind of thing where you can just try as many times as you want without any of the restrictions that actually existed back in the day. One major difference that we do know will be in with the new Mage Tower is gear scaling. Previously in Legion, you could just keep gearing up throughout the patches, and by the end of the expansion, it was much easier to complete the Mage Tower scenarios. But with the Timewalking event, everyone will be scaled to a certain point. The dev team are normalizing player power in the Mage Tower this time, so you will never be able to outgear the content. You are going to have to rely on skill to get these challenges done. That's going to be an interesting point to keep an eye on, partly because I don't really trust Blizzard to balance things properly, and partly because several specs had a much easier time in the Mage Tower when compared to some others, even if they were doing the same challenge. Each challenge was also tuned for each spec, so this could end up being a hot mess of balancing issues, but having everyone scale to the same point should actually make this easier to balance overall. Okay, so the Mage Tower is returning in more or less the same state as when we left it, but what about the rewards? Can we get the artifact appearances that the Mage Tower used to offer? Simply put, no. I'm afraid that's one of the main things that will be changing with the Mage Tower as well. When you complete the Mage Tower scenario, you'll be instead rewarded with a new recolor of the tier 20 raid set for your class. We've previewed these sets before, so I'll go through them relatively quickly. Most of them look really good with the new color options, and the tier 20 sets were some of the coolest looking sets in the game in my opinion. I guess it helped that they had a great base to work off of with the original tier 6 designs, but these recolors also use the Mythic versions of the sets. That means they typically have more detail, they have more spell effects and smoky stuff, and overall they just look more epic. If you didn't have any of these sets before, or you just want them in a different color, the Mage Tower is going to offer you an interesting reward to chase after. Now, all of the druids out there will get an extra special reward for completing their Guardian scenario, a new bear form. Okay, it's a new skin or colour for the werebear form, but it still looks really cool. So if you missed the first chance to get the werebear form from the Mage Tower, you can actually go get this souped up fell version instead, which in my opinion looks way better than the original. Those are the rewards if you complete individual scenarios in the Mage Tower, but there's also a reward if you complete all of them, the Soaring Spelltome. We don't have too much information on this mount yet, but we do know it's a flying mount and it's probably going to be a giant book. If you remember back to the start of Shadowlands, the dev team started a community event where we could vote for a mount to be included in the game. The winner of that competition was the Wandering Ancient, as you might recall, but one of the other mounts that you could vote for was the Soaring Spelltome. I guess the dev team thought that was too good of an item and an idea to pass up completely, and the mount will be making its way into the game with the Legion Timewalking event if you can complete all 7 of the Mage Tower scenarios. Because there's quite a lot of overlap between classes and specs and which scenarios they can take part in, here's a handy dandy chart to show you all of the various specs that can complete each scenario, so you can map out the fastest or easiest way to at least attempt each individual scenario without having to level an army of alts. Completing all 7 scenarios doesn't actually mean you need 7 different classes or even all of the classes. You can usually get it done on just 3 or 4, as long as you have 1 healer and 1 tank in there somewhere. Filling in the rest of the gaps shouldn't be too hard at all. With all that being said, this does mean that the original rewards from the Mage Tower, the Legion artifact appearances, will still be unavailable and unobtainable. The only slight exception here is for Guardian Druids, because previously they had no other way of obtaining that model. It may be a different colour or a reskin or whatever you want to call it, but this does give Druids a way to obtain a previously unobtainable model, which makes you wonder whether it would be such a bad idea if all of the special artifact appearances were made available again. If the Mage Tower is coming back, why shouldn't the rewards? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this matter, because I know it's going to be quite divisive. Would you prefer those appearances remain more exclusive and rare, or would you like to see them available again for more players to collect? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Another addition to the Legion Timewalking event is something we haven't seen before, Timewalking Mythic Plus Dungeons. This is kind of a backwards Timewalking. Usually our characters get scaled down to a dungeon, but with Mythic Plus Timewalking, the dungeon will get scaled up to us. So it's going to be level 60 Legion dungeons, and all of the loot is going to drop at the same item level as Shadowlands Mythic Plus Dungeons, which I still think is kind of crazy. Then you also have the Mythic Plus system on top of that, so the dungeons will scale as high as the key level you can complete, and the rewards are going to scale along with it. You'll also be able to upgrade that gear with the Valor currency, and completing Timewalking Mythic Plus dungeons will count towards your weekly vault dungeon runs. So essentially the dungeon pool for Mythic Plus is much larger during Legion Timewalking events, which could help keep things interesting as the months roll by. There's also going to be a special affix for these dungeons called Infernal. This will replace the seasonal affix that you would usually see in Shadowlands dungeons. Near most of the bosses in a dungeon you can find a Legion beacon. If you use this beacon you'll summon a special Legion commander. They each summon different monsters for you to contend with. They also all use Reign of Chaos, which will look familiar to anyone who raided in Legion. You have to soak the big red circles that spawn, and if you miss any, an Infernal will spawn, which you will have to kill. So you have to kill the commander to move on. It's kind of like the current season's affix, except without the anima powers or really any of the cool parts. You also can't really skip any of these beacons, because if you engage the boss that the beacon is next to, the beacon will trigger anyway, so you'll have to deal with the Legion commanders no matter what route you decide to take. Hopefully they add in some interesting twists or quirks, because right now it's just a relatively standard affix that slows you down, and Timewalking Mythic Plus could be a great time to introduce some funky and weird affixes. You know, go crazy with it. Why not? It's a time-limited event, so I hope they do get creative with it in the future. Adding more dungeons into the Mythic Plus pool is an interesting way to change things up, and I hope the dev team expands upon this in the future. To run a Timewalking Mythic Plus dungeon, you'll need a Time-Worn Keystone. To get your hands on one of these, you'll need to visit Tashup in Oribos. He's right next to the weekly vault, can't miss him, and he has a quest you can pick up to run a Time-Worn Mythic Plus dungeon. Completing that quest will reward you with a handful of Time-Worn badges, Valor currency, and some anima. And of course, there's the typical weekly Timewalking event quest to complete a few Timewalking dungeons for a piece of normal raid loot, so that's the same as every other Timewalking event as well. I think this event could be fairly interesting in general, just because it's introducing more than just time-walking dungeons with a low item level reward. You know, there's some stuff in here that can boost up your power level, and there's a lot of cosmetics to collect as well. But perhaps the most disappointing thing about this new Legion time-walking event is how rare it could end up being. Sure, it's going to be fun to bring back the Mage Tower and have those scenarios be scaled and challenging. We get to go back to the Legion dungeons. They even reward really cool gear and really good rewards. But if the time-walking events continue on the same schedule, there could be 4.5 months between each Legion Timewalking event, and it's only going to be up for 1 week after the initial extended duration of 2 weeks. So if you don't get the goodies that you want in those first 2 weeks, you might have to wait 4.5 months to finish it off. I know the dev team wants the weekly events to rotate and to create some sense of excitement and exclusivity, and they want that time pressure to ensure players try to log on and play during those short time windows, but honestly, I think a lot of players will either have forgotten or maybe even lost interest in the vast majority of the Timewalking event's features by the time it comes round again. With there being so much content almost just wasting away within the older expansions, I think the dev team should make Timewalking, or something like Timewalking, way more common and have one event active at all times. There are so many dungeons, so many raids that just aren't being used 90% of the time. If you really want to tap into some of that stuff, do it in a way where it's actually available more than once every 4.5 months. But that's how the Legion Timewalking event is shaping up on the PTR so far, and everything you need to know about it if you're curious about it. What do you think of the spellbook mount being made available in-game? How do you feel about the Timewalking events in general? Do you think they're fine how they are? Or if not, how would you improve them? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone who's subscribed on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I'll see you next time.